Mr. Speaker, there is a new paradigm in Guyana in relation to revenue streams. Revenue streams today include the monies from that oil and gas contract that we signed on to in 2016, and also from the credit carbons as a result of our forests being in pristine state. Carbon credits is what you call the monies from that project. And Guyana, as a result of especially that petroleum agreement, is today, per capita, one can say, probably the richest country in the Americas. And it is very important, too, that we understand the multiplier effect of that project, namely all the businesses, all the other operators, and so many other nuclear impacts, as it were, from that one sector that today now brings in so much money. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, when I heard some of the government benches yesterday talking and trying to do comparisons with what we did as a coalition government, I want to indicate that that is rather unfair, if not dubious, because of the fact that the revenue streams today is far superior from anything we ever had. And that is why, although it was called a rotten agreement, and in the recent newspaper I see the S word being used by a former vice president, by the existing vice president, we feel that we must not compare the two. Yesterday, Mr. Ganesh and Mr. Chris, honorable members on this side, explained what we did, especially in sports and culture and in local government, to show that with the little that we have, then what we did. And so this kind of analysis whereby the PPP would want to say that we ain't do nothing, we ain't do one thing, it must be understood. We have to now make sure that the comparisons are comparable, as it were. Mr. Speaker, we must not compare this context with what happened before. What we must insist on, is a comparison as to what is being done now with that large revenue stream by the PPP as against what ought to be done. And that is why in this budget, just before it, we had indicated that we would like to have some halves in relation to what this budget must state. And yesterday, my good friend, Mr. Joe Hamilton, was giving the impression that we do not propose anything. We do not propose anything. Well, I want to say that we did propose a number of things in a release called Budget 2023 Must-Haves. And we indicate that we wanted an increase in the minimum wage of $150,000 with corresponding adjustments to personal income tax. We proposed an increase in old age pension to $50,000. We proposed an increase in disability benefits to $40,000. We proposed a reduction of VAT to 12%. And we also proposed that new shelters around the administrative regions for women being abused. These shelters would support the victims of domestic violence, along with the two others that was mentioned by Joe. Mr. Speaker, we understand that in every budget cycle, you're going to have more and more now being spent. But it is not good enough to say that we have done this and exclude us from what ought to be done. And in the context of a Guyana in which, as the Kaichur News mentioned, 43% of Guyanese can't afford a healthy diet, 5% undernourished, and this is an FAO report. It happens today, and you can argue whatever you want, but the whole point of it is that it is not intellectual dishonesty. Look at them. We are saying that it is important to understand. Even, Mr. Speaker, this is why, the give and take in a normal democracy is absent with that kind of attitude.
I remember the give and take in the House, though, is when you are going to quote the report and lay over for us, and quote the source.
That is an important editorial as to our cost of living. Everything has gone up. Everything. I'm not being intellectually dishonest here. The Stabrook News in an editorial indicated, please don't get so fired up, Mr. Finance Minister. Don't get so fired up. I am saying that in today's context, we are having a hard time. And that hard time is as a result of the tremendously high cost of living. And in that reality, we must ensure that we do the comparatives as to what we could do now with the oil and gas and credit carbons revenue stream as against what we are doing. And there is every righteousness about that. You have you have at least the attitude of indicating that we must not go there. Well, I am going to go there. Mr. Speaker, it is very important then that we do an analysis as to why it is not being done. The analysis is simple. This is a working class supposed government. It forgot about all of that. A good time now. And it is going on and on in relation to what is called certain schemes, very clever, in which a certain set of people in Guyana are going to be the beneficiaries. I want to indicate, Mr. Speaker, when you have the construction industry having so much money poured into it, when you have so much money being poured into the construction, rule of thumb, it is a certain set of contractors who are friends and family will always be the beneficiaries. Construction industry is going to Mr. Speaker, the heckling started very early this morning. But I am telling you that the construction industry is one of the epicenters of corruption. I will lay over the report of Transparency International 2005, which indicated that that is especially happening with oil resource countries. Some bites. I'm glad that it's at least biting you. Mr. Speaker, it has all the ingredients conducive for corruption. There are so many uncertainties in the execution that it is possible to draw it is impossible to draw what so many economists referred to as the complete contract. You can't get a complete contract, let's say, for that harbor bridge as to what and what it will be at the cost. You cannot have, for some of the roads in Guyana, you cannot have a complete contract as to what it will cost. And that is why so many roads are being built, and next day, literally, they're breaking and apart. And you know what the corruption, especially in that construction industry, does? It creates what is called an undermining of the political process. And it enables patronage to triumph over honest politics. Mr. Speaker, we know very well that as against what we have as infrastructural spendings in Guyana, a little bit of that could have been nudged away and at least be given to the working people so that the working people can have a better day than not having to literally get malnourished. Mr. Speaker, I am happy that I have gotten up the bile of the Minister of Finance. It means that I am making a good point. Mr. Speaker, it is all there. It is all there. And we're going to come to what is happening now. The EPA, the EITI, all of those institutions are also today, as a result, being subverted because of what we have under the corruption and the patronage that is happening in Guyana. These transformational projects, as they call them, as Comrade Khemraj yesterday talked about, and I regard Mr. Khemraj as a typical PPP person, but he also made some dubious comments. Here, this is what is being said by him. The PPP is not thinking about votes. That is why we are having big transformational projects. Listen to me, Mr. Leaders, people over there. That PPP leadership always think about that and nothing else. It's a well-oiled political machinery. Whenever it makes any decision, it thinks about the votes. And I know about that. That is the leadership. It is the reason why, and it is the reason why they seek to dodge today, Mr. Speaker, a strong EPA and also a strong EITI. This resource-rich country today is having what is called elections without good governance. They prefer elections only, as if elections is what is democracy. Elections is not democracy, Mr. Speaker. Elections is one component, and they're there now. And they had an inheritance and a largesse that is the greatest ever. And that is why I said, your inheritance that you have been devised, the inheritance that you have been devised is that which is so humongous, but you got to know better, Mr. Ashley Singh, honorable member, as to how you're going to spend that money. Don't ever say that these projects might be transformational. I remember when they said that the Skeldon Sugar Factory will be transformational. Where is the Skeldon Sugar Factory today? Fiber optic cable, FIP Motilal's road, all of that. You must understand that it is not because you deem it transformational. What was transformational, however, is when we signed that agreement that it could make you $200 billion today to spend in this budget. What was transformational was the right sizing of the sugar industry so that you don't pour good money behind bad sectors and billions of dollars.
Honorable member, I just want to caution you. Remember, you're speaking with the Speaker So when you say you must, you're admonishing the speaker to do something. If you want to refer to the other side, the honorable members over there, right? Because I take some of these things personally.
It is not a budget that I can support. There is no planning, there is no targeting, there is no outputs. The budget is pathetically policy poor, a PPP. Pathetically policy poor. Yes, they love to say that it is the biggest budget, but I want to say, as Mr. Christopher Ram has indicated in his analysis, it is also with the biggest deficit. Biggest budget with the biggest deficit. Mr. Speaker, we have taken some severe body blows of recent times. Severe body blows. I mean, you have Mr. Kwame McCoy, he was very slippery yesterday, and he walked with the own aisle. And it's the wrong size bottle he walked with too. Mr. Speaker, we have to understand that because of that no planning, no outputs, no targeting, policy poor budget, that is why the cost of living has gone so high. That is why, effectively, compared to what the salaries and wages are, why it is that the people can't find what is called better conditions or standard of living. It is because we could have done, notwithstanding what might be the economic reasons for inflation, we could have neutralized or neutered those with at least better incomes. Tell us how. And it is instead of spending so much on infrastructure, you could have given 5% more for the people of this country. How much you spending on workers? Yes, you could have even given 10% more. And you are stating today that we could not. Mr. Speaker, we did not have that revenue stream that is like a gold stream today. We don't have it. And that is why it is important. You don't deal with poverty by cash transfers like that. What is the output of $40,000 for 10-day work? You're just going to buy the votes. That is all you know about, buying the votes over there. Mr. Speaker, it is important. You are there. I don't know about votes being stolen. If it is any votes, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the preliminary points I wish to make in relation to this budget. And I think I have been rather impactful, don't you think? Today, the cost of living, as I wanted to make this point, cost of living is so much. Everything up. Even when you go to the market and you see fish, ginger, dal, rice, everything gone up. And these people are saying with a humongous revenue stream that they can't do better. Show me now, show me. That is their contrived histrionics. That's their contrived theatrics. Just like what Slippery Kwame said yesterday.
Okay, honorable member, Mr. Ramjattan, you know better. You're in here longer than I am. You know, I just want to. I don't like to interrupt people of my cohort, so I allowed you 10 times to use corruption during the speech, right? And I've asked you to deal with. You either say Comrade Kwame, regardless of reference to his oil, or honorable member. Our Honorable Member Kwame McCoy.
To spend so much money on sugar is pouring good money behind bad, Mr. Finance Minister. Mr. We have spent prior to this budget approximately $13 billion. We are today going to spend another $4 billion behind sugar. They have been advertising for jobs at Rosal, and people are not coming. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we gave them their severance benefits. If it is going to drag an economy down, we had to make the correct decision. That was transformational. Mr. Speaker, we repeat and maintain that the false explanations and narrative being given by the government, the Minister of Agriculture, and CEO of Gaisuko are all ill-advised and is a road to nowhere. Mr. Speaker, the evidence is clear that a perennial shortage of labor will persist in this sector, that the new CEO and all of his arrogant attitude that caused even a board member.
Honorable Member, again, we have a standing order with respect to accusations against persons who are not in here, who can't defend themselves. But as we're on this point, let me just say I've given you an extra minute because of the interruptions, but you'll need a 5-minute extension so that you could conclude. But before I ask the Honorable. Sorry. 30 minutes. You have 10 minutes more in the first 30. Yes. Uh, let me just. Yeah, I have allocated already the 1 minute and 30 seconds of interruptions on my part. Honorable Member, you may continue.
Sugar has been dying since we lost that preferential treatment. Moreover, our workforce is not trained. Our workforce is not trained beyond substantially a cutlass and punt mentality. That is not what the next generation in the estates have been telling me that they want. They want to get jobs into the in the new sectors. And you want them to have this cutlass and punt mentality so that you can always bamboozle them and confuffle them. Mr. Speaker, we are always going to have, and especially with climate change, we are always going to have problems with that sugar industry. It's management, no workforce, Gawood having strikes all the time, and you must now appreciate the transformational decision that was made to right-size that sector. In relation to rice, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I am happy to hear $300 million to promote research and development to improve yields and to ensure alternatives to insecticides to control that paddy bug. I come from the rice industry originally, and I know a little about it. But in relation to this livestock and poultry, I dare say that I have seen a paradox here that I found in the statistics which Mr. Zulfikar provided. We see an increase in livestock production and poultry production, but we see a reduction of milk and eggs. I hope that the minister is not a reason for that. Or whatever the reason for it, there must be major interventions for milk and eggs. Mr. Speaker, we have also fisheries, cage fishing, it's called now, cage fishing. brackish water shrimp farms, and all of that. Mr. Speaker, we must also do an analysis as to why all these fish sectors has gone into a decline. Mr. Speaker, we had a report that came out recently in which it is saying that it could very well be what honorable member was saying yesterday, so much environmental hazardous stuff being poured into the ocean. But you don't want to do an analysis as to that and to speak the truth to the people in the fisherfolk community. However, you're going to take how much billion? 1 billion to give the 7,500 fisherfolk cash grants. That's not how you're going to solve the fishing industry's problem. Mr. Speaker, these are what are non-starters in relation to what is called aspects of the agriculture policy. Forestry, you have indicated, Mr. Speaker, there are lots that could be done other than just handing out cash transfers. You should have gone and taken on Mr. Vince Adams to tell the Exxon people what they must not do. What they must not do. And that is, don't throw the water with the oil inside of the ocean. That is one of the reasons. But you don't want that. Now you're proposing and they want to dispose. You're proposing and they want to dispose. What do you think about the cash grants? Cash grants in relation to $349 million for this cage, fishing, and brackish water. Mr. Speaker, why don't you tell us who and who will be the beneficiaries of this cage fishing and the brackish water shrimping? Mr. Speaker, you're allowing them to interrupt all the time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they are always, Mr. Speaker, when you are going to do all of that kind of cash grants, 589 to 6,991 farmers, it is not going to go well with anybody. And especially when, as against another community, you do not raise the wages and salaries, especially of public servants. The other community, you know what I'm talking about. It is important that you now understand that some money should be put in there. Mr. Speaker, I want to indicate that the security sector is in disarray today. With the little that we had, the security sector, under which came the police, fire, and prison and Kanu, much was done. Under local funding, under the Citizens Security Strengthening, under the British Security Sector Reform Report, which the PPP was so afraid of and scared of. They didn't want the British security reform at all. We have done plenty. And I am happy that in view of this paradigm shift of lots more monies in the revenue stream, that we must see Mr. Ben and his team, honorable member, continue the good works that we had started. Crime has gone up to the stratosphere. Execution-style murders, almost a weekly event. Domestic violence, robbers, choke and rob. On the videos, you could see it happening. And even cutlass and gun firing at the President's State House. It is terrible. And of course, the advisories from the various countries indicating that you got to be real careful when you come to Ghana. Last year, the minister had a lot to say of what was not done by the APNU AFC coalition. He will speak after me in this debate, but I want to just remind him of the very many things that we did. Mr. Speaker, we have strengthened patrol management and the use of data and analytics in policing. We have promoted a culture of nonviolence in those years, improving and appropriating money for public spaces. We have fostered socio-economic insertion activities for at-risk youth. We do not see that happening now. We restructured the Office of Professional Responsibility. We also had commenced and was going ahead with the Guyana Forensic Laboratory, and we understand that this is continuing. But what we have now, Mr. Speaker, is but an extreme levels of crime, and it would appear that all those consultancies that we had in relation to Mr. Russell Coombe and the British security sector reform have been shelved. Mr. Speaker, we had continued to ensure that we had close collaboration with the Caribbean Development Bank and the various institutions, CONSLE and RSS, and so many. Mr. Speaker, we had done a huge set of work in relation to rehabilitating and building new police stations and all of that. And at-risk youths, as I just mentioned. The TechVox school education was also done with the assistance of the Citizen Security Strengthening Program. So, you know, when they come here and say nothing was done, with the little that we had, lots were done. Lots were done.
For you to do more, honorable member, you will have to get a 5 minutes extension now.
Comrade Speaker, I move that the honorable member be given 5 minutes undisturbed to conclude his presentation.
Could you define this undisturbed 5 minutes for me? Honorable member, you may continue for the next 5 minutes towards your conclusion.
One of the important aspects was also ensuring that we had scrutiny and transparency in the security sector. And it is pursuant to Article 119D of the Constitution, we are supposed to have what is called the Parliamentary Oversight Committee on the security sector. You know, since the start of this parliament, we have not had any meetings of that Parliamentary Oversight Committee. Mr. Speaker, when inside of our administration, I have the Hansard of the meetings. All the members of the various discipline services forces have been called there and cross-examined by Mr. Gill, Mr. Rohi, Mr. Berry Ramsaran, and also Mr. Hamilton. Hamilton was there, but you don't have it now. You don't have it now. Hansard will show Mr. Gentle being cross-examined, Silal Prasad being cross-examined, and also Courtney Samuels being cross-examined. What do we have today? That is why I'm saying that we have a governance structure in Guyana, the governance structure in Guyana that wants to avoid and evade and eschew. This is called our security sector from whatever. This was 2017 and 2016, yes. And in 2018, Mr. Gill asked that we go into the interior areas. We had to find from this committee monies to go take them to check on police stations all across the country. Today, they have made that thing dysfunctional. So we can't ask Mr. Hicken anything. We can't ask the heads and the deputy heads anything at all. And that is why today, that is a violation of our Constitution and our standing orders. And Gail, Mr. Honorable Member, knows about all of that. Mr. Speaker, I just want to conclude by stating It is important that we take cognizance of what we had done in relation to preparing and planning for what is called this security sector. We had Mr. Russell Coombe and the British High Commission dealing with the work and a consultancy on maritime security and safety. It was a preparatory work for purposes of ensuring when the oil and gas stream comes on board, what it is that we have to do. And they did a magnificent piece of work in relation to threat assessments and all. The current threats at that point in time, around 2019, is the Venezuelan hostile action. They were talking about present and near future. Cyber attack targeting government department or agency. Mr. Speaker, significant fire, explosion, or other industrial incident at the shore bases and maritime facilities. Cyber attack targeting port facility. And even they mentioned here projected threats, civil protests due to perceived unfair distribution of oil and gas revenues, as we are seeing today. Civil protests due to perceived unfair distribution of oil and gas. Mr. Speaker, what we're going to have is a tremendous amount of resentment and disaffection, as they said, if this is not seen to be distributed equitably. And they are going to make sure, and then what they did was make sure that this must be done in accordance to avoid any security threats. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? They don't want to acknowledge that kind of planning and preparatory work. We now see them today avoiding all of that. I understand that Mr. Russell Coombe had come back, and I am certain that he would have given them the reports. But they have not, in this budget at least, tried to knit that kind of security projections into what is called a budgetary arrangement so that we can spend wisely for those projected threats. Mr. Speaker, with all of these that I have just spoken about, the preambular remarks on sugar and rice and all of that, it is important to understand you really cannot support this budget. You really cannot. It has all the hallmarks of that which is ensuring a disproportionate distribution of our oil and gas funding, oil and gas monies. And we are waging now a serious psychological battle as to the resentments that will be coming. We are in an explosive situation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to make these points.